Hi, Mia Parrish, and today on Devils in the Details, we're speaking with Marcus Dale and Jacob Moore about Arizona State's commitment to the indigenous communities that are so prevalent in Arizona and the work that's being done there. So thank you for joining us. And first, maybe we could start with both of you, but Jacob, first tell us a little bit about what you do at Arizona State and how that work informs and engages you in regards to the tribal nations.
Thank you for allowing us to be on your program. Skaktash, my name is Jacob Moore. I'm the Associate Vice President of Tribal Relations for Arizona State University. I work out of the Office of Government and Community Engagement. And my role within the university is to assist in our partnerships with our tribal nations and communities. Arizona State has a long history of working with our tribal nations and communities. Since about 1959, and education was one of the first programs. And out of that, we've developed multiple relationships in law, in engineering, in education, and social work. And so as we spend a good part of our time facilitating these existing partnerships with individual tribes and helping to facilitate and create new ones.
Marcus, tell me a little bit more about the work that you do at ASU.
So thank you also for this opportunity to share and this moment to talk about what we do. I am the program manager for a industry outreach program called Construction in Indian Country. That's our logo behind me. What we do is we facilitate conversations as a liaison between the construction industry, so which is architectural planning, design, and the prime contractors with the tribal nations. The organization was founded. The conversation started back in 1990 at the boom of Indian gaming, and formally became a program here at Arizona State University 2000-2001.
Could you share with us what is going on and what has happened with the tribal communities and how we've been able to engage with that sort of co-epidemics going on?
Particularly with the Navajo Nation, what we did is we were able to hit these pockets of networks of people who are wanting to help or wanting to give back to our communities. Some of us, I'm Navajo, I'm originally from the New Mexico area, and so as a citizen of the Navajo Nation, many of us that live here in the metro area are wanting to figure out ways how we can give back but not go home, because we don't want to add to the problem. We're trying to be a solution rather than part of the problem. And so we have, pretty much some resources available here down in the valley that aren't available up north. 27 square miles of Navajo Nation land with 13 grocery stores to serve roughly 175,000 citizens. Lately you've heard in the media that the size of the Navajo Nation is roughly the size of Virginia, and 13 grocery stores to serve that area. So we went shopping and we've asked people to donate. We collected essential items, non-perishable food items, school supplies, even down to seeds, so that we can do some farming and some gardening as a more sustainable solution for food. And we hosted 2 drives here at the ASU stadium parking lot, right in front of Sun Devil Stadium. And we asked Sun Devil Nation to show up. Both native and non-native came by the truckloads, literally, and was able to provide. And so that was just one area that we were able to assist with the COVID-19.
Thank you so much, Marcus. Jacob, what other ways have we seen that the tribes and communities need help to address issues? And how do those challenges vary from group to group?
Sure. I think the first to recognize is that when we all went into this, in end of March, early part of April, the university stepped up its response in specific to PPE, and the university has a PPE network, and so we know that every community, whether it's tribal, county, municipalities, were dealing with a shortage of masks and face shields and test kits and all of that equipment, and so tribes were certainly part of that effort, for the university to respond and making sure that either from our stockpile or that was donated to the university, or to, Biodesign and Luminosity that we're producing and are still producing, some of that equipment, is that some of that equipment has been distributed out to our tribal nations, really on kind of the front line, so to speak. Beyond that, we've also been assisting in terms of testing through Biodesign with the capacity to deliver testing. We've done testing for the Navajo Housing Authority. We've done COVID-19 testing for the Colorado River Indian tribes. We're currently doing some testing now in the township of Guadalupe, which is partly Pascoyaqui tribe. And so at least 3 tribes we've been directly involved in testing. We're also involved in wastewater epidemiology, not just in Arizona, but Otakuye Conroy Ben, who is an engineer, environmental engineer, who is Lakota, who is from South Dakota, has been using the technology to test their wastewater systems for the prevalence of COVID-19. And we're also looking at doing some similar work at the Navajo Nation. I think in summary, the work extends beyond some of the most immediate needs, but also looking at the infrastructure. That's a significant issue. And then also epidemiology, public health, and really trying to connect the technology and the technical expertise that the university has to offer with those tribes in greatest need.
So you're saying this is a really complex issue. You have a lot of different communities, a lot of different tribes, a lot of different jurisdictions and needs from PPE and testing.
So COVID-19 in many ways has been described as a heat-seeking missile to underserved populations, and really has brought to the surface a lot of these long-standing inadequacies in infrastructure systems. So for tribal communities, it's a combination of housing, healthcare, water, education, broadband infrastructure. These have all made the tribes vulnerable to the COVID-19 viruses, which is why we're seeing higher numbers in tribal nations and communities. And so, part of it, I think, is really recognizing that to a certain degree, matchmaking in terms of what are the technologies, what are the resources that we have within the university that can address these issues, and also thinking beyond the most immediate need. We know that we're in a triage stage, but we also know that there's a process of recovery and renewal. And so, very much a university that focuses on innovation is, how do we use a strength-based approach or asset-based and really look at what's there already, and how can we improve these infrastructure systems for the long-term future. For our students, the issue of broadband technology was one that we recognized early on when our students didn't come back after the spring break. Some of them stayed home and they come from communities where they have limited broadband accessibility or even access to a good phone signal. And so we were, and still are, making laptops available and Wi-Fi hotspots available to the communities. And they, in turn, the communities themselves have been creating spaces where they can have Wi-Fi available. And so oftentimes we have students in certain communities that, they have to go to a different location just to upload their homework or download their homework.
What have you been able to do in this triage phase?
I think that for leveraging our resources, right, being part of Arizona State University, and as Jacob said, that, think of innovative ways, innovative solutions, using the resources as a Research One institution here at Arizona State University. We have a lot of labs, we have a lot of professors, a lot of experts. And so how do we leverage all that skill and all that knowledge to help an indigenous nation? So one of those ways was we were invited to take part of a water access coordination group. You may have heard that about 30 to 40% of the Navajo Nation only has running water, no running water. And that's piped, right? So being able to go home, the luxury of going home and turning on your faucets and have running water to be able to wash your hands, which is essential to fighting the COVID-19 spread. When you don't have that luxury, what do you do when you're mandating people to wash your hands, to be extra hygienic in a period like this? So multi-agency with Indian Health Services, FEMA, CDC, and a dozen of Navajo Nation governmental departments and agencies, along with about 5 institutions, universities from around the country, including those here in Arizona, working together and trying to figure out what is the most strategic way in prioritization of water access and building up the water infrastructure that has been a lingering problem for decades. And so when you're dealing with such a rural area, mountains and canyons and rivers and streams and dry beds and, you talk, well, just put the water in. It's not that simple. It's not that easy when you have such a geotechnical barrier amongst that big of land. And so one of the ways is to be able to provide water access points throughout the entire nation. We're talking 27,000 square miles of land, and to be able to put water within, as much as a 20 to 25 mile radius, for every resident on the nation.
How are things today? How's the status, Jacob, of the situation?
There's no question about locking down or wearing face masks or addressing the issues, and the results are starting to prove themselves out that it works. There's an article in the New York Times about the White Mountain Apache tribe where they have been doing, the contact tracing at the home level and getting patients identified early. And even though their rate of infection was higher, their mortality rate was lower, in part because they were able to address the issue earlier than what we're seeing kind of at large. And so there's some real lessons to learn, I think, in terms of what tribes have been able to do in response. We all know that we're not out of it yet, but I think that there's some lessons there to be learned in terms of how tribes have approached this issue. And I do want to give credit to those internally as well. I know that for Marcus and I, we can talk about all the stuff that ASU is doing, but in some ways it's a continuation of our work even before COVID-19, our embeddedness within tribal communities, and really being able to respond, with, for example, the School of Criminal Justice has been doing policing in a pandemic, advising to a couple of tribal nations in terms of how do you police in a pandemic. Again, the work of Dr. Pepin and others that are leading the effort around testing capacity, around doing some of the social tracing. And so the university has a lot of dedicated people that have really stepped up. And simultaneously, I think I want to give the tribes credit for trusting in us enough that, that they're willing to take us on as partners to help assist during this difficult time. But I to your question, I would say, there's a lot of positiveness in terms of what's coming out of this.
There are 22 federally recognized tribes in Arizona, and that's a lot, and it's complicated, and there's a lot of need. Jacob, how can people help if they would like to help?
To one of your earlier questions was this idea of, where are we today and where do we see the future, is that I think all of us have been scrambling in terms of, trying to deal with the most immediate needs, this idea of triage. And as we start to move out of that phase, there's a great opportunity for others to participate. When I think about our tribal communities, and this is really any community, it's an ecosystem. There's the environmental issues, there's the healthcare delivery issues, there's the education issues. And so the ability to recognize that if we work in one area in tribal communities, it's often tied into other areas, much as language or culture and environmental. And so, we always invite others that would like to support us in this journey to, let us know, because I know that there's other resources out there that the university has in terms of our partners that can certainly benefit our communities. We often do get questions from people that are asking, how can we support the most immediate needs, which is basically essential services, but we're also looking to build I guess what we refer to as, we're still building the runway before we can fly the plane. And so we would certainly appreciate support from anyone that's interested in supporting this effort.
Where would people go if they wanted to learn more about how they can help? Is there a website or a phone number or something like that would be useful for people to know?
Sure, there's a couple of places. One is the Office of American Indian Initiatives at ASU. We don't currently have specific information in terms of how can you assist, but we will make sure that we have something there.
Marcus, where can people help? How can they find out how they can help?
With construction in any country, you can email ciic@asu.edu. That's ciic@asu.edu. You can also go to ciic.construction.asu.edu. Go to the news column, and I've been putting bulletins and statements as companies, tribes, nations, any kind of information or requests from coming and going, which either direction, on a blog, so to speak, under the news column of our website. Talks about the latest COVID-19 drive, any potential drives coming up, other sister organizations or partner organizations, companies that are doing drives. I've been trying to make this kind of one centralized informational place for everybody within our networks and then some.
Thank you so much, and thank you both for joining me today on Devils in the Details.
Thank you.
Thank you.